Okay, so hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Transmedia Arts Seminar, sponsored by the Mahindra Humanities Center and Meta Lab, both at Harvard University, and run by two professors of theater and performance studies, Magda Romanska and myself. My name is Hannah Borden, and since I imagine that we have here some people who are attending the Transmedia Seminar or Transmedia Arts Seminar for the first time, before we turn to today's speaker, I would like to say a few words about it. The seminar is positioned to explore artistic and theatrical practices and performances by triangulating new media technologies, transmediality, and performativity. Conceived to inquire into the emerging forms of transmedia performance, it explores medial interactions in the physical space of art or theater, as well as multi-platform, networked and interactive media environments that expands the space of art or the theatrical space as they extend beyond it. We are thrilled about the talks scheduled for this academic years, and you can find all of them on the Mahindra Humanities Center website under the Transmedia Arts Seminar. And so I would also like to pause here and say a few words how you can participate in today's session. During and after the talk that gathered us here, you are welcome to submit your questions and provocations via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we are recording the seminar, and the recording will be posted on the Mahindra Humanities Center website, provided with closed captions and available for public viewing. So joining the seminar, you are under no obligation to appear or speak in the recording. If you would like to participate in an anonymous way, you can do so under an alias or by turning off the video. And if you would like to participate in an identifiable way, we want to note that by doing so, you are authorizing the use of the recording in the way I just described it. So now it is truly a pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, one of the leading voices in the field of posthuman studies, Francesca Ferrando. Currently teaching in the program of liberal studies at New York University, Dr. Ferrando is a philosopher and public intellectual, someone who has been deliberately employing old and new media platforms to harness our attention on the core of her philosophy, the posthuman. So along these lines, she was not merely the first speaker in the history of TED Talks to address the topic of the posthuman. Indeed, using that forum as a media platform, she simultaneously released that posthuman as content for thought, cross-media circulation, and creation. Furthermore, at the time of her TED Talk, she also engaged that posthuman to fashion a shared ethos as she founded the Global Posthuman Network, a site as much dedicated to the posthuman paradigm shift as to the fashioning of post-disciplinary connections between scholars, artists, and scientists, or as she says, between human and posthuman beings who are inquiring into the unsustainable dimensions of the present through the lens of posthuman futures. To make another transmedia point about this network collectivity she has been co-creating, the Global Posthuman Network organizes conferences, symposia, forums, courses, and workshops, and has given impetus to multiplying blogs, and podcasts as well. So the network both expands through and depends on traditional and new media platforms, meaning it itself emerges as an ever-changing, multi-layered and open-ended transmedia landscape, one which lends itself to being attended as a transmedia environment and for its transmedial networking performativity. To highlight the importance of the medium of print and academic writing to her posthuman, I would like to end my introduction by noting that Francesca Ferrando is the author of numerous publications, of which her capacious philosophical posthumanism, published by Bloomsbury in 2019, is the most recent one. So even though Magda and I cannot see you right now and will not hear you, please help us in welcoming Dr. Francesca Ferrando.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your beautiful presentation. And thank you so much for your work as well. That is also excellent. Thank you so much, Magda, for organizing this incredible series of talks and lectures. Thanks so much, Matthew Betos, for being supportive. Thanks, of course, the Mahindra Institute and the Meta Lab at Harvard University. Thank you so much, all of you. And thanks our attendees, because today we're going to talk about an existential performance, how the situation with COVID-19 and our existential experience is really changing. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and inviting you to be part of this lecture as an experience. So I'm going to give you an experience, let's say. After that, we're going to have a whole hour for discussion, insights, and questions as well. So let's start by showing some information. Okay. All right. So the topic here is COVID, transmedia, and the art of posthuman existence. My hope is that at the end of this talk, you're going to have a different view about your existential perspective on COVID. My name is Francesca Ferrando. I am a professor at NYU Liberal Studies. This is my website, theposthuman.org, and I am also the co-founder of the Global Posthuman Network, posthumans.org. This is my book, as Anna and Magda were kindly commenting before. And this is not only a posthuman lecture, but it is also an existential journey. So this is why I would like to welcome. We're going to have 3 parts. This is part 1, in which we're focusing about our spatio-temporal location in COVID-19. This is an artistic revisitation that is really connecting the idea of COVID, not just as a virus, but all the aspects that are changing because of COVID-19. In fact, this is a very delicate historical moment. There are many challenges. There is a pandemic going on, and also, of course, a loss of biosecurity. There is an economic crisis, or many economic crises around the world, job losses, political turmoils, ecological devastations, psychological distress in dealing with the new normal. So these are all the challenges, and of course, many more that we all are dealing with in this historical moment. But there are also some very important social and individual realizations. For instance, the need for deep social change and racial justice. The realization of the interconnection of existence, an environmental awareness, and the clear message of respecting wildlife. And one of the reasons why we have a pandemic right now is because the boundaries between human society and the wildlife were not respected. And the surge of existential crises and existential quests. In fact, COVID-19 has reminded us all of the fragility of human life. Many people have died. It has also reminded us of the inequities in the social order. And this is almost it says it all. Let me read it for you. If you think your mask makes it too hard to breathe, imagine being Black in America. And on the On the left side, we have mortuary trucks in New York City when there were too many people dying and there were no space anymore for, let's say, the common citizens. The consequences of ecological disbalance. So COVID-19 has reminded us of the consequences of the ecological disbalance. But we have to remember that a crisis is not just a crisis. In fact, in shamanistic cultures, crises, commonly involving physical or psychological illnesses, are contemplated as potentials for initiations to a deeper understanding of existence. So this is a very different way to look at crises. And they usually are seen as the birth of the shaman, and the shaman becomes a shaman after a very deep crisis, sometimes even getting very close to dying. So it's a very different understanding how a crisis can really bring something out to the surface, to the existence, to the existential understanding. So I would like to say that this is not just a pandemic. This is also a wake-up call for every human being. We are part of a species, part of a planet. We live and we die. We are in this together, and also we are all very different. Much has changed in our lives. And in this, I would like to really focus on technology. In fact, the post-human approach brings technology to the existential reflection. Technology, in fact, is not seen anymore just as technical objects, but something that is changing not only our life, but the unfolding of existence itself. And in this, it's interesting to see how the biological body at risk of viral infection is reclaimed by the booming of virtualized life. And also how technological addiction has evolved into the normalization of digital association. No longer just related to work or entertainment, the screen has become the existential mirror to know about the world. And so we are constantly searching information about, between little comma, the physical world through the online world. And so there is this constant connection between, oh, what is this? Let me Google it. And this constantly flux. But also to know others. And many people today, nowadays, meet online and have families online and talk to families online. And so to know not only others, new people, but also to know about others, about, for instance, their physical and psychological well-being. And on some level, with the pandemic, one way to look for someone to make sure that they are okay is checking their social medias. And how my American mother, I have different mothers, but my American mother say, if they post, you know that they are fine. So the idea that if someone is active online, you know that they're at least physically fine. And also to know about the self. Google, who am I? Google, who am I? The screen, the locus of self-inquiry. And during COVID-19, during social distancing, everything became the mirror of ourself. And the screen became the self-inquiry, the mirror of self-inquiry. Now, before we go on, I would like to take 1 minute break and ask all of you to look at your relation with technology and what has changed since the pandemic has started. So I would like to take 1 minute. I'm going to play some music to really help you, really connect this discussion to you. My aim here is not just giving you some academic information. I want you to really tap in your own existence and really reflect what's happening inside of you, not just outside of you, inside of you. In this, since we are already right now connected through technology, I'm going to ask you to be the subject of this exercise. And I'm going to, again, play 1 minute of music and ask you in this minute in which I'm going to play the music of beautiful work by Zenon Marco, who is a musician and also a philosopher at the New School in New York City. I'm going to ask you to focus on your relation with technological devices, with social media, and also with physical interactions before and after COVID-19. And I'm also asking you, please, not to be judging yourself. This is not the goal of the exercise. The goal is just kind of a checkout point in which you would try to have neutral eyes. You check where you were at with your relation with technology, with your relation with the physical world outside of home, and where you are at now. So checking this to you without a judgmental voice. So I'm going to play 30 seconds to 50 seconds music background for you to read aloud, to get deep into yourself. And then in the second part of my talk and in the third part, we are going to realize how these all tapped into this meeting today. All right. Just let me get myself again on the video. All right. So I hope that you had a non-judgmental session. I want your insights to stay with you in the next half an hour. And I want you to really, every time that something tapped in what we're talking about, take notes. And then I would like, if you want, to share that with us all through the Q&A or in the second part of our meeting, which is going to be very much about sharing. All right, so we're going to enter part 2. We're going to talk about the virtualization of everyday life with Zoom meetings, like ourselves right now, Zoom weddings, Zoom schooling, Zoom exercising. For instance, Zoom has taken many different ways to exist, with Zoom bombings as actually becoming an artistic endeavor. For instance, we have the case of Lance Weiss, who is a stand-up comedian in New York City. And this is from his website. That's what he says. Due to the global pandemic, it appears that live stand-up comedy in New York City is out of commission for some time. Recently, I have been hired by companies to bomb their online meetings and spice things a bit. up a bit. So even the dreadly outcomes of Zoom bombings are actually being turned into comedy by some artists, for instance, US-based Lenswise. Also, we're talking about existing online before being born, with, for instance, what we could call as online prenatal stardom. Of course, we can bring many examples of these, but easy to think and to relate, ultrasound pictures on Instagram, to real births live on YouTube. And there are actually videos with millions of viewers of live and real births on YouTube. And also, of course, the other side of the spectrum in the cycle of existence. We are born and we die. So with digital mortality and also with digital immortality. We can think of many different instances, but we can talk, for instance, of the social trauma of live-streamed suicides. And in this case, I would like to mention, for instance, something that happened very recently. September 2020, Facebook refused to take down the live-streamed suicide of 33-year-old veteran Ronnie McNutt. So once they take down the video, was too late, and it was already viral online. We also, of course, we can talk about the very known case of deadly selfies. And this is a case that also happened recently. A 31-year-old resident from Kazakhstan fell from a 115-foot high cliff trying to take a selfie to celebrate the lifting of the COVID-19 lockdown of the city. And also we can think of how technology is not just a technical object, but is becoming an existential technology after death. For instance, we can talk of Replica, the artificial intelligence who can't wait to see the world through your eyes. And Replica was created because the CEO of this company, her friend died, and she wanted to replicate him, to be able to talk to him again. So she created this chatbot that had all the information about his friend, and she felt very connected to him. After that, she created Replica, where you place all your information online on this website, and there is this avatar, this chatbot that knows a lot about you and becomes kind of your second self, and that you can talk to, and is someone that a lot of users say that make them feel good. Some actually say it made me a better person. So we're not just talking about something we are using online, we're talking about an exchange that some people claim is enhancing their life and their psychological wellness. Of course, we can also talk about online memorials. We can talk about social media memorialized pages and Skype notifications. Here I want to really go into storytelling, and I want to share with you a memory that is very dear to me, and also a person that is also very dear to me. He was a photographer, Patrick Millard, who died in 2011. He was a very, very gifted artist who I met in one of the Humanity Plus meetings. He was a transhumanist, but a different brand of transhumanist. He was, I would say, much closer to posthumanism, although at the time the terms were kind of confused. He did incredible work on the topic of post and transhumanism, and he was working a lot on technological symbiosis, ecotechnology and biotechnologies. And his whole message was the interconnection of humanity, ecology, and technology. Here you can see some of his work, Formatting Gaia, 2010, where you have the physical body connected to the environment and also to technology itself, the cyborg, but a cyborg that is not disconnecting from nature. I have another image here that I'm going to show later on. It's connected to Patrick, and it's also why I also want to mention that Patrick had was a big inspiration for many, many people. This is from his website, Human Beings, Technology and Nature are now all part of a congruous system of existence. Formatting Gaia depicts this world where there is a physical connection between the three and all work in unison with one another. So inspired by his work with a group of artists in Italy, we did in 2013, so Patrick at the point already died, we had a conference in Rome. So we created this artist with this exhibition. This was specifically titled Veritas, which means truth in Latin, the real key to virtuality. So when a metal key can move out of the screen into the physical world, we have entered the post-human age. So we have here an avatar and a physical person. The avatar is holding the key. In the second part, we don't know who is this, if it's the avatar or is the physical person. That doesn't matter really, because in the third part, we see the key that has transpassed from the screen into the physical world. So there is no, the liquid boundaries of existence. Now, I'm saying all this because it was late night. I was in New York City. I was writing my PhD dissertation, which eventually turned into a book, The Posthuman. And I heard the Skype sound, the notification, tang, and I checked, and it was from Patrick. And this was summer 2012. He had died 6 months before, and I literally froze. And that was around the time that we usually had chats. We usually chat, we used to chat around very, both of us used to work very late at night. So very late at night, sometimes we would have exchanges of, like, oh, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? So when I got this notification, I literally froze. And I was actually writing about, avatars and cyborgs. And in the moment, seeing this message, I couldn't open it. I had to stop. I was in New York City. I took a walk outside. It was 2 a.m. There was no one around. I relaxed. And then I came back home. And I felt that it was okay for me to check the message. And I was like, what's happening? Because after he died, I thought a lot why he died. He was very young. And I thought it maybe, like his energy maybe was still in the internet. And of course, I had these kind of thoughts when you care about someone, you don't want them to go. And I really thought, since he was so much in love with technology, he used Second Life with everything. I thought that maybe his energy was on some level still going on in the internet. So at this point, I'm thinking, is he still there? And he's trying to give me a message. So I go back to the screen and I take the courage, say, I'm ready now for whatever it is. And I click on Skype, and it was one of the automated Skype notifications for his birthday. And I literally melted down. It's like, okay, that was a Skype notification. But I must say that this was 2012. Now 2020, 8 years, I still remember that moment. And it was kind of an existential revealing when I really realized that all these boundaries between who we are, our physical space, our digital spaces really had melted down. Technology, in fact, is not just technology. And here I want to talk about ontological hacking. In fact, technology is not neutral. Technology is a way of revealing. And on this, I'm quoting Heidegger, who used to say in his beautiful essay, The Question Concerning Technology, that technology is a way of revealing. And this is why I like to talk about digital existentialism, connected, of course, to what we were saying before. Who am I? Google, please tell me. Digital existentialism or dataism. For instance, Yuval Harari talks about dataism. So the point here is that when we talk about digital existentialism, is a revision of Descartes' cogito, in which he used to say, I think, therefore I am. Here, the phrase is, I am connected, therefore I am. And if we can go into some type of storytelling narrative, we can bring some music and say, I'm connected, therefore I am, checking my phone at 1 a.m. And if you're checking your phone at 1 a.m., you should smile because you're on camera. Actually, you should always smile because you're on the camera of existence 24/7. God is watching you and you are watching God. And now that according to Nietzsche, God is dead, we have technology everywhere. We will never be alone again. And even if you're not watching me now, you may watch the video recording of my glamorous journey to the supermarket tomorrow, 1 year from now, or after I die. we used to take a picture to remember the moment. Now we take a picture to create a memory, to mold a narrative. Sharing our existential storytelling in the magic mirror on the Facebook wall. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most me of us all? And of course, here, I want you to think of your relation with social medias. How are they affecting your everyday life? Once you check your Instagram, your Facebook, your Twitter, how do you feel? And here, of course, we can learn from an ancient work by Walt Disney.
In the magic mirror, come from the farthest space. Through wind and darkness I summon thee. Speak. Let me see thy face.
What wouldst thou know, my queen?
Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?
Yes, so if we think in these terms, we can really see a connection here. Of course, fairest, I would here bring as the idea of being just, and we have to revisit, we can deconstruct anything at this point and really bring insights to our own vision, to our own existential vision. And I want one more time to stop here and ask you to think how you feel after you checking your Gmail account or any email account you have, before and after. How you feel after you check your Facebook page. What is that relation? How is it changing your existence every day? In fact, this is not just something that we are using. Instead of turning into dust, everything now turns into big data to be systematically analyzed, traded, and archived, eventually becoming obsolete, hard to recover, and possibly lost. But you do not have to worry. In the memory of space-time, nothing will be lost, and nothing will ever be the same. And we're entering the third and last part of my talk, of our talk. We're going to focusing specifically on transmedia. So what is transmedia? Magda already gave a wonderful presentation last week, so I'm not going to go into details. And if you're not sure, you can also watch her video recording. But of course, just very briefly, this is a quote from Henry Jenkins. Transmedia storytelling represents a process where integral elements of a fiction get dispersed systematically across multiple delivery channels for the purpose of creating a unified and coordinated entertainment experience. Ideally, each medium makes its own unique contribution to the unfolding of the story. So what is existential transmedia? And this is kind of a revisitation of Jenkins' quote. Existential transmedia storytelling represents a process where integral elements of a narrative, instead of fiction and narrative. So we're not talking about fiction anymore. We are talking about narratives. Think about your own narratives. I'm going to talk about that at this later, at a later point. But anything is a narrative. What you write on social media is in a narrative. What you tell yourself is a narrative. So integral part of a narrative get dispersed systematically across multiple delivery channels for the purpose of creating a unified, between little commas in this case, and coordinated existential experience. Ideally, each medium makes its own unique contribution to the unfolding of the life story. One more time, life story. We're not talking anymore about movies, about video games. We're talking about life stories. So here again is a revisitation of this idea of transmedia through these multiple platforms that contribute to single experiences. Here, for instance, we have audio, email, video, flyers, blogs, and to this Twitter video, images, and to these we are going to add intentions, dreams, diets, actions, words, livelihood, and more and more. In fact, the question here is, what if your life is a transmedia experience? One more time. What if your life is a transmedia experience? Not anymore technology is something you're using. Technology is something that is giving you a specific existential experience. This is why we can talk about existential storytelling. When we're talking about narratives, we need to really understand what we're talking about. First of all, for instance, we can think of what we tell ourselves with personal narratives, family narratives, education, self-esteem, individual visions and dreams, intentions, social narratives and beliefs, and more. Also, what we are telling the physical world, and these are not in any hierarchical ways. These are all interconnected, intraconnected, and changing and exchanging each other, all these layers. So here we're talking about actions, behaviors, thoughts, words, lifestyles, diets, products that we use, etc., etc. And of course, also what we are telling the digital world with our posts on social medias, our emails that we write to others, pictures, videos that we watch, music that we listen to, websites that we visit, because our digital traces are actually making the net. They're actually having a huge impact on what we are seeing online. So none of that is neutral. All is contributing to the existential unfolding of experience and of this dimension. The art of post-human existence. This is the time when we realize that our lives, in all of their physical and virtual aspects, are our greatest legacy. This is the art of existence. And here I would like to give a brief introduction about existential posthumanism as a philosophy of life, approaching humans in all of their diversities, non-human animals, technology, and ecology relationally, as co-creating each other, co-constituting each other. Emerging in the global call for social change, responsible science, and multi-species coexistence, posthumanism investigates the human condition as a cosmic co-emergence. From a location that is deeply aware of our geological time, the Anthropocene, the era in which we now know that our actions are having a direct impact on everything else, planet Earth, the ecosphere, the biosphere, non-human animals. We are living in the sixth mass extinction, where thousands of non-human animals are actually getting extinct every year because of human action. Posthumanism brings awareness to the historical habit of speciesist supremacy and humanist entitlement. We exist in a material net in which everything is actually connected and potentially interacting. A network of energies, alliances, waves, reflections, diffractions. Are we fully aware of the existential dynamics that we are manifesting online? Are we completely aware of the existential dynamics that we are manifesting on this planet? We humans are evolving. We, as individuals, are constantly changing. This is Leela, the cosmic game in the Hindu tradition. This is the transparent society. The panopticon, according to Foucault, the panopticon, has lost the central tower. Everyone is watching everyone. In this, the loneliness of the subject is lost in the recognition of the others as co-creating the self. These are my conclusions. COVID-19 reminds us all that we are never going to be the same. We are rivers floating. We are oceans. We are also who we think we are. This is why the power of technology is ontological, as it co-generates existential storytelling. COVID-19 calls for full existential awareness of the self in relation to others. And think, for instance, of the ecological situation that nowadays is getting actually a little more in balance because of less movement of humans around planet Earth. Yes, this is a challenging time and also a unique opportunity for social wisdom and self-mastery. This is a post-human wake-up call, a wake-up call that is actually coming from a virus. Not to be relics of time in the wheel of evolution. Not to be relics of time in the wheel of evolution. We are here now. Actions of the multiverse. Conscious channels in the unfolding of our existential manifestations. That's who we are. I would like to thank all of you for your extremely kind attention. I would like to thank you for your wise presence in this world and for making this world a place full of awareness. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank the people whose work has been enhancing my presentation. So many of the images here have been credited, the music, beautiful music by Zenon, also fair use of the work of Disney, websites. This is my own website if you want to connect. And this is, again, big thanks to Magda, to Anna, to the Mahindra Institute, to Matt, and to MetaLab. Thank all of you. I am extremely honored and excited to be with you now for actually the second part of the discussion, which is going to be about all of us in this 21st century and during a pandemic that is also bringing very unique wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francesca. There was a great lecture. Particularly appreciate the insight that our, digital lives are in some way an expression of transmedial existentialism. That's definitely a new concept that I'm going to be exploring. All right, so everyone, we welcome you to ask Francesca questions. You can type them in the Q&A. If you want to ask a question as well, you may raise your hand. Please let us know if you would like to contribute something or if you want to continue the conversation as well. All right, hold on. Somebody's Thomas.
Hello. Francesca, can you hear me?
Yes, Thomas, hi.
Made it. That was a very interesting talk, and I wanted to share the way in which digital media is creating a different selfhood for me. Whether maybe this is other people's experience as well, whether for good or ill, it's permitting me to explore disassociated parts of my personality. I don't know if that's very good or not, but for example, I have an ongoing conversation on WeChat with Eunice about Nietzsche, and I get kind of on the far edge of my Nietzsche research with him. But those conversations only occur with him on WeChat and never over email. I have conversations on WeChat with a chat group of students in the School of Marxism at the university here, and they don't interact with me very much. All of those conversations are focused on my despair over the rise of Trump and neo-fascism in America. They don't talk to me very much, and that in a way captures my feeling of who the message that we want to bring to America, all of us, is this is insane and has to stop. But no one seems to be hearing that. So, and in other places, I sing silly renditions of symphonies I know well to just silly friends aside of me that even you, Francesca, doesn't know. So I don't know if that's good or bad, it might be therapeutic, but it might also be neurotic since I don't know who I am anymore.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And I would like also for all of you to know that Thomas Steinbach is one of the founders of the World of Posthuman, of the Society, World Society of Posthuman Studies. So that's also awesome, Thomas. And Thomas is based in China, teaching there. So it's really interesting to hear your experience. And I think it's very interesting what you said, that specific platforms allow for the generation of a specific type of narrative, while other platforms maybe do not allow for that. So it's very interesting how, going back to the point, how these technologies is not just something that we are using, but it's something that is specifically bringing a specific voice out of us. And it's also interesting what you were saying about different selves, to the point where maybe you don't even recognize some of yourself that are coming out in some of these specific platforms. So this is really what we're talking about. This is why I placed, when I went back to Jane Skin's quote, I placed unified between commas, little commas, because I'm not sure that this existential experience that we're having is actually unified. In fact, if we think of ourselves, who we were even just 1 day ago, but not talking about 1 year ago or 10 years ago, of course it's connected to who we are now, but it's not unified. On some level, some of these experiences are gone. So I was actually thinking about, maybe unified is really not the term that we should use. And I like what you said, because it's really bringing, the focus of attention here that when we're talking about existence, all these layers may not be unified. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we go into, psychopaths. It just means that we are really living through different, of course, I like the metaphor of the multiverse, but not to go into physics. It's also very interesting, going back to a psychological approach, how different platforms bring different voices in us. And those voices only come through specific channels. So that's very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any more questions? I have a question, Francesca. I was thinking, the 1350 plaque in Europe has been an impetus to the change in the ontology of the time, from a communal understanding of the self as part of the religious community towards more individualistic understanding of the self, which eventually emerged in the Renaissance and Enlightenment. And this transition, there was a kind of an anamorphic shift almost in the way that European culture moved from communal self-awareness to more individualistic self-awareness. And I'm wondering whether this pandemic in some way is not reversing that trend. This is a kind of a two bookmarks of 1350 and 2020, whether we might know when the definition, at least the historical definition of the human, as defined by Foucault and Derrida, and being bound to the historical emergence of the Enlightenment discourse, whether we are not reversing this in some way and moving away from the sort of cohesive and coherent selfhood towards more of a dispersed understanding of the self in more of a communal spaces. Um, what do you think about that? Like, what is this? Is I mean, this is sort of what you seem to be conceptualizing, that this transmediality of the self is a form of reversal of that. Yeah.
That's so interesting, Magda. And this is just a technical note. Thomas, do you mind muting your microphone? Thank you so much. That's very, very interesting, Magda. And yes, I think that the answer is you're absolutely right. If you, for instance, if you bring back Foucault into the conversation, when, for instance, he talks about the death of man, he's actually saying that the moment when we start to talk about something is because, let's say, between the we have a problem. For instance, COVID-19. Before December, not many people on earth even knew about this disease. Now everyone knows about it because now we have an issue. So the same goes with the human. Once you start to talk about the human condition, is because there is an issue with that. And for instance, this idea of the unified subject that is in separation from others, that is, a full agent, but in a closed way. So I like the notion of agency, but as an open agency that go into non-human agency, responsibility, etc., etc. But this other notion, like you were mentioning, coming, for instance, from the Enlightenment, and maybe coming from an historical outcome where maybe the human needed to feel like empowered. Because, if we think about where the human come from, maybe at one point in history, when the human, for instance, was at risk of extinction, for instance, the ice ages, maybe it was important to create a type of narrative in which the human had some type of like primacy. I don't know, although the Paleolithic doesn't show so much of an anthropocentric view. But going back to our point, so it's true that for some centuries, at least in some societies, the human has been self-constructing itself in a close way, in separation from like other type of lives, the ecological balance, etc., etc. And now we are realizing that this type of view doesn't work at all anymore, and is actually very negative for us, because it's a view that is really creating all the issues that we see right now on planet Earth, including COVID-19. Because if we had a different understanding of the human, if we knew that we are always in relation, if we knew that we need to respect, for instance, wildlife, that we have to give space to other, non-human animals, we would not be where we are now today. So I think that this anthropocentric view in which we can do anything, and that is just really crushing us as a species. So I think that, and it is actually, like the main risk of human extinction is actually human actions. So if we go on this path of anthropocentrism, is suicidal. It's literally seen our own suicide live streamed on this planet. So I think that, the only way that I see as a philosopher to shift things is really to stop and to rethink everything. The way we are teaching young kids, the way we have constructed a society, we really we need to realize all our laws and really realize that we need to get out of this notion of the human that you were describing. And in that, I don't think we necessarily need God. I think that God can be important for some people, and it's totally fine. But also, once you realize that you, on some level, are everything, think of Hinduism or Buddhism, that you are Brahman in that sense, you don't need the notion of a God outside of us. So in that sense, God can be used as a way to enhance your life, and it's absolutely fine. If you believe in God, it's beautiful, but God doesn't have to be, again, something external. It can be something that is, co-manifesting in everything, and you're part of God. And that's also for instance, Hindu tradition, and also on some level, the non-theistic approach of Buddhism, where again, you are fully your master. So it's interesting that you were mentioning religion. So I think, religion can help some people to realize how much they need to really respect everything. But again, you don't need that once you realize that you are connected to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's somewhat different than what we have experienced in pre-enlightenment era. It's just the question of understanding of the self as either being part of the larger whole, or no, or being completely alone. All right, we have a question from Xiaoli Yang. Francesca, I really enjoyed your super visual presentation. I wonder if you could flesh out a bit more about the ecological dimension of this kind of existential posthumanism. What could I think of might be what I could think of might be to think through our coexistence with this virus, but would like to hear what other aspects you would bring up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celia, and thank you so much for bringing this to the conversation, because I didn't want to go into too much of a long lecture, so I focused on technology, but if I knew that the aspect on ecology didn't have enough voice, so I'm really glad that you are actually asking this question. So the understanding of the human in relation to technology is, to me, is at the core of posthumanism. I also didn't mention, you know, all the theoretical debate of the post-human. You can check on my book if you're interested in that. There are many schools that is, you know, transhumanism, posthumanism, anti-humanism, meta-humanism, blah, blah, blah. There's so much more out there. But when we're talking about posthumanism, and when we're talking about philosophical posthumanism, I really like to explain it in simple terms as the understanding of the human, as Magda was saying, not alone, not in separation, but as co-creating relationally, existentially with ecology and with technology. In fact, for instance, ecology itself, the term, comes from Greek oikos, which means the home we inhabit, although I would expand that and I would like to go into a Zen reading of this. For instance, Alan Watts, who was a philosopher based in the US, originally from England, who studied a lot of Zen and Taoism. And I like his metaphor here, saying the human should really see themselves not as, for instance, habiting planet Earth, but as a fruit of planet Earth. Pretty much like a tree giving out apples or oranges or lemons or whatever you want. So is the human, is a fruit. Literally, we are literally, physically, literally coming out of planet Earth. So in that sense, we need to see us in this kind of perspective. Now, I also want to mention that although the Gaia approach is interesting, in my take is really not, let's say, going into a bucolic approach in which we can just go back to nature. That's not the message. I want to say that I do acknowledge technology ontologically. What does it mean ontologically if you're not in philosophy? As part of existence, of being. So I don't want to say the real human is the human who, you know, go back into nature and, you know, and don't use a cell phone or whatever, which is fine. If you're into that idea, great. But that's not what posthumanism is about. Is trying to realize who we are in the 21st century. And in the 21st century, yes, we are fruit of the planet. We need to realize that. We need to locate ourselves, especially temporally in the Anthropocene, as I was mentioning, not anymore just the Holocene, in which we were seen as one species among others, not really having any impact. Now the term that geologists are used is the Anthropocene. So we really are seen as a geological force who is changing planet Earth, radically changing planet Earth on all levels. But also, I want on this also to acknowledge technology. And technology doesn't have to be destructive. It is, at the moment, we really are not doing a good job, for instance, with reuse of technology or with, for instance, recycling of technology. And that has to change. And we have literally fields and fields close to us. I'm right now based in New York State. In Pennsylvania, there are lands filled with cell phones, old cell phones that people maybe use for 2 years and then they throw out. That cannot be supported, no longer supported. So we need to think of technology that is expanding, that is ontologically here with us. And so I want to acknowledge technology, but I also want to acknowledge that technology is not pushing out ecology. Technology also come out of ecology. The minerals that are in your laptop right now come from planet Earth. And has been, of course, manually has been changed through human labor. But what I'm trying to say, and most of, for instance, mineral used in Mac apples, Macintosh, if you use Apple, for instance, as a brand, they come from Congo, from rebel zones, where they are mined in rebel zones, creating a lot of disrupt in the ecological balance, in the human population, etc., etc. So what I'd like to say here is, this is not a Luddite approach. So it's not, okay, let's go back pre-technology. To me, history is not linear. So I cannot jump back to the past because the past is gone and the future is not here yet. We are in what we are, which is not bad or not good, is what it is. But realizing this, realizing the impact the technology is having not only on us individually, but on society, even humans who do not use technology at all, they are still impacted by technology. All the satellites on space, all the space debris that is actually falling down on planet Earth. So even the humans who say, I'm not using technology, I'm going back to the forest and live with no electricity, fine, it's a beautiful idea, I love the hippie style, but they're still also impacted by the use of technology. So we need to really also not judgmentally see where we are at as a species and also see where we can be. So realizing the technology is manifesting, obviously, in the 21st century. There is no going back. We are cyborgs already. Look at us right now. Look at this meeting. And we are changing each other's existential experience through a technological mean. That's huge. That could not have happened 200 years ago. So this is something we need to recognize in order to be honest to the unfolding of existence. But it is also true that the technology can also be in tune with ecology, in tune with humanity. That's, I think, it would be an eco approach to technology or e-technology that needs to be really developed. And I think that, for instance, thinking of laptops that are not just dismissed. The laptop that I'm using right now, I had to buy 2 years ago. The one that I had before was perfect. Absolutely working, nothing wrong with it. The only problem is that I could not update the software because it was from 2014. So I literally had to store that in my, like in my room, and eventually donated it. But having to buy a new one, I did buy a used one. I don't want to, it was not for the money, it was not to bring more damage to the planet Earth. But what I'm trying to say here is that the only reason why I could not use that laptop anymore, it was because it was made in a way that could not be updated, not longer be updated because of the software. So I'm trying to say here is that, the technological giants like Apple and, Microsoft, they have also to realize that we are in this together. And I don't mind buying a new software, make me pay a software, but don't push me to having to dismiss a computer, buy a new one that is, eventually is going to go into the landfill after it's donated to other people, because, we are thinking capitalistic ways. We cannot think in those ways anymore. Of course, people have to survive. These companies also have to make their money, but there are other ways to make money. So now, if we are thinking of going on exchanging with money or cryptocurrency or whatever, it's fine. Well, we need to think in a wider way. How can I make money in an intentional way that is not damaging other humans, also other non-humans, and also the planet Earth?
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Mark Esposito is asking a question. I'm interested in your perspective on the co-emergence of humans, technology, and ecology. I'm curious how we can understand these different co-emergent parts without human exceptionalism. Does the terminology of cyborg organisms accomplish this as a common descriptor for human technological and ecological parts? If yes, how can a typically biological term organism grant technology, for instance, in a larger earthly ecology, but by lending this inorganic part the interdependent agency of an organic part? And then, hold on. I feel like technology and nature ecology are often seen as oppositional, and I'm curious if you can suggest a narrative that reconnects these concepts.
That's a beautiful, beautiful question. Who was that? Just to thank, who is the person?
It's Mark Esposito.
Mark, thank you so much, Mark, for your beautiful question. Yes, so let's, I'm going to focus on the first part of your question, then the second part. The first one is about human exceptionalism. All right, so let's talk about it. I remember being at this conference, and there was a very well-known humanist. And I asked, and he was talking about how humanism is really, about helping all humans. And I remember asking how we can think of the human in separation, from instance, what we're talking about, from the planet and from everything else. And so I was asking, how can we still keep anthropocentrism? And he said, well, for humans to care about the planet, they have to realize that it's good for them. So he said, in that sense, you can still use anthropocentrism. And I'm kind of fine with that, although I would like to say that it is kind of the shortcut, and shortcuts are often eventually bringing back the issue itself. So I think that human exceptionalism, it's a really wrong teaching that we are giving that doesn't have to be there. For instance, other cultures, I'm thinking, for instance, of shamanistic cultures, I'm thinking of, for instance, Native American cultures, for instance, don't have a human exceptionalism. I'm thinking now of, work by Vivero de Castro on the cosmologies of Indian American cosmologies. And he's very clear about the idea that the notion of the human, according to these other approaches, is not human as a species, is human as the subject who is having the existential experience. Let me clarify this. So the point is that we are all part of, call it collective consciousness, call it in this tradition would be the spirit, call it the manifestation, the existential unfolding. So we're all part of this, humans, non-humans, animals, technology, planets, everyone is part of this. But everyone is based on a specific perspective. Like right now, I have this experience, and my memory of this experience will be not only this conference, but also what I see, for instance, the background around my laptop. This is going to be very different from each of us. But all of us is almost like in an ocean, all of us contribute to the unfolding of this unified experience, which is also different. So in that sense, we need to recognize that, of course, we have a specific perspective that is also probably, I would not say essentially, but I would say probably partially molded by being in a human body. For instance, we walk, we don't fly yet, unless we take a plane, but it's different. We need food to survive. We need to drink water. So we have a specific experience that, for instance, a laptop doesn't have, or a bird doesn't have, or a flower doesn't have. So obviously, being a human comes with a specific type of molding of the experience, but it's not exceptional. It's unique, but it's not exceptional. So in that sense, keep going on with this narrative that we are the best one, we are the most evolved one, we are the most important ones. All of the documentaries that you're going to find, for instance, on YouTube or Vimeo about the human, always start with, okay, the most evolved species. They are always this exceptionalist narrative. We don't need it. Not only we don't need it, but it's really giving us a wrong message. Message that is so dangerous that it actually can bring our own human extinction. Because if we go on with this idea that we are the best of the best, this kind of narrative is going to be translated to other let's say, beings or other existential manifestations that are happening, like technology, and that tunes very well with the whole fear about AI takeover. So now, in an AI takeover scenario, sorry if you're not familiar with this, artificial intelligence, so the takeover of artificial intelligence, in America is huge, the debate. Some people, really also well-known people, Stephen Hawking and many others, talk about the real risk of artificial intelligence taking over the world, which means that in a close future, there are not going to be a human presidential debate. Maybe there will be a debate between different algorithms, or there will be no humans in power anymore, but maybe humans could be nice pets of some developed intelligent machines. So the humans would have lost their power on epistemological power, so the power to say what it is, to write the narrative. And this is seen as this dreadful scenario that we really need to fear, and we really need to run before AI takeover. AI it's faster than us, and stop us in this marathon. I'm completely against that kind of narrative, because it's based specifically on this dualistic approach, specifically based on the tradition of humanism, according to which some humans were more human than others. Think of sexism, racism, ethnocentrism, ableism, Orientalism, you name it. And also on this human exceptionalism, in which we are the most. If we are so much into this kind of narrative, yes, it's very possible that in a close future, AI is going to take over. So we really need to be aware of this and change the narrative. Stop, pause, and rethink. are we really the most exceptional one? Are we really the best ones? Because if I'm going to be in the forest, like I was mentioning before, on my own, I'm going to probably die because in 7 days, I'm probably not going to be able to gather enough food. I probably don't have those skills anymore, although my ancestors did. Am I so much incredible? I look at this morning, I saw amazing birds flying, and I was thinking, oh, I wish I could fly. I cannot do that. Yes, I can take a plane, it's different. So I don't think that I'm less. So I'm not about human extinction. There are some movements here that are talking about let's hope for human extinction because we are so bad and we are terrible and we are the worst species. I'm not into that either, because it goes again into the narrative of the good and the bad. Let's get out of the narrative. Let's be honest. Let's see what's happening. So we're not the best one. We're not the worst either. I don't know if lions would do better than us or COVID would do better than us or anything like that. But let's step down and see what we are doing. In that sense, we become really full agents in the unfolding of existence. So thank you so much, Mark, for your beautiful question.
All right, we have one more question. Using Zoom and small group participants, exploring experiences of belonging as immigrants and refugees, you are making me think very differently about technology as ontological, co-generating existential storytelling. Can you talk about the researching with technology and how technology may enhance or inhibit sharing stories and lived experiences?
Thank you so much. Who brought this beautiful question?
This was an anonymous question.
Thank you so much, anonymous person. Your question is really beautiful. Yes, there is a lot of work to be done that has been done, for instance, by Luisa Passerini, who is an oral historian, also like emeritus, and she also worked at Columbia University. She's done a lot of work about technology and migrants. So also, as a source, as an academic source, you can look into her work. But let's go into my answer to this and to a post-human approach to your question. I would say that it's very interesting how technology, it's really at the core, for instance, of the migrant experience. In so many different ways. And also how ecology is at the core of the migrant experience in so many different ways. In fact, a lot of the reasons why migrants become migrants is, for instance, for ecological distress. Areas that there is no water, that there is no longer water because of climate change, hurricanes, and all these kind of natural, between the common disasters that are not natural, that are also caused by the Anthropocene. So it's very interesting, really, the migrants' experience, because first of all, we have an ecological issue at the core, at the base, which is caused by human actions to begin with. Then we have the migrant experience. And I remember reading, some xenophobic comments some years ago about, oh, those migrants, they are so poor that they're always on the cell phone, and there were images, of migrants on the cell phone, without realizing that's how they were able to move around the land, to know where to actually safely pass through. The technology of the cell phone for the migrants was truly existential. They were not checking their social media to have fun. They were checking the map, the routes to move around and to actually save their lives. Once they arrived in areas where they could actually save their life, now they had all the xenophobic waves of hate against them. And at the point, having the connection to knowing that the mother, where the father, where the children, that was all done through the phone as well. Where are you? Because there was not anymore a territorial place where they could meet safely. So I think that the technology, for instance, in the case of migrants, it's really bringing even more obviously how technology is not just something we're using. It's something that on some level, it allows us to survive by checking, for instance, specific ways to leave some areas and go to other areas. And also how it also allows to check on others. Are you alive? Are you okay? Where are you? Because you can no longer know where your family members, they're all dispersed all over. So I think that your question again brings so much to the conversation. I really thank you so much for focusing on this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have Olga who wants to answer a question. Olga, can you unmute yourself and ask question? Olga?
I think that Olga may have just wanted to ask that if Francesca could restate the question at the beginning, because there are different levels of volume, and I think that's all that Olga was checking in about.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. We do have another question from Stefano Rozzoni. And Stefano says, many thanks, Francesca, for your always brilliant and thought-provoking insights. How do we position in the conversation those human beings who resist engaging with the forms of storytelling that you have discussed, particularly for what concerns the evolutionary patterns of humanity that you have delineated? I mean, resist both on the voluntary basis, no interest in using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, thus minimizing one's digital trace as much as possible, and because of lack of resources, accessibility, skills, or digital technology.
Thank you so much, Stefano, for your question. By the way, Stefano also is a very, very inspiring researcher on the topic of the posthuman and literature. So I'm really, really honored and happy to have you here with us. Stefano, thank you so much for your question as well. I'm going to give you two different answers. Well, not different, they're connected, but from two different viewpoints. The first one is, for instance, humans who would like to have access to technology, but because of lack of resources, they don't have access to technology. So now access to the internet, for instance, is recognized as we had Zoom coming in. Thank you, Zoom. So we were saying that we have, for instance, humans who would like to be connected, but they cannot be connected because, for instance, of lack of resources and lack of places where to connect, etc., etc. So if that's the case, we to be connected nowadays is recognized as a human right. So of course, that kind of issue is a social problem that is bringing, and for instance, with the case of schooling, that really came to the surface. So how many people that could not connect on Zoom, could not attend school, to the point that in India, for instance, we had a Dalit girl who actually suicided because she was, she was a very good student. She was so distressed by the fact that she did not have internet access that she actually suicided. So we need to really take this very seriously. And if we have a situation like nowadays, in which students are asked to be home and connect online, we need to prepare very well in advance, because they have the right not only to the education, but also, even more in this case, to connect to the source of information that where they are, for instance, getting their education. So I think that, for instance, in the case of this girl, things could have been done differently, having maybe places with very small groups where people could have gone and having internet access. All these things have to be thought before, not after you have a case like this where someone suicides. So I think that the lack of resources, COVID-19 is very interesting because on some level, of course, there is so much distress coming for so many different reasons. But on the other side, it's almost like opening a wound, and all that is there was already there, but we were just kind of taking things for granted. Now we are seeing, racism is a real issue in America, and not only in America. For instance, the problem of classism, it's a real issue in India, not only in India, etc., etc. So we have now the opportunity for real re-envisioning of society. And I think that this is, of course, the other side of the negative approach. We can really rethink because we have a social pause on so many levels. So going back to your question, the first side of it is that, of course, if someone is not connected because they can't, we need to take care of that. If someone isn't connected because they don't want to, and this is very interesting because, for instance, some years ago, when social media was considered the big hype, 10 years ago, the idea was, we're all connected, we're all connecting the whole world together, what an incredible age, blah, blah, blah. That kind of narrative changed very, very quickly. For instance, the idea that, we are together and we are alone. We are on social media, and instead of feeling better, we're feeling worse because everyone looks better than us. We are in this together and we are not really in this together because, for instance, we don't have access to this. Or, for instance, another example that I wanted to bring about the internet is the distress of privacy. Digital privacy is not there. In some countries it's better than others. But I'm talking from a country where digital privacy is completely liquefied. There is no right to have any privacy in a case where big data are not protected. So the whole narrative about being connected is really changing. And so some people are saying, guess what? I don't need this. I can get rid of all my social accounts. And I know people who have access to all of these, and they prefer to say, you know what, I have a better life when I am disconnected. And I think that is brilliant. I think that it's really show that you are very brave, because it's going to take other ways to, for instance, you know, like bring maybe your vision out. You know, it's easy for me, for instance, to say, oh, we have this lecture at Harvard, let's post it on Facebook and connect with the people who want to be here. If I didn't have Facebook, and if I didn't have an email, it would be harder, although there are other means that can be used. So it is definitely, you know, on some level need to really, you know, some rethinking. But I think that it's a trend. I think that the best way for me is probably really understanding where you're at, and maybe trim any kind of digital experience that you don't need. Because it's true that the digital experience, it's an unfolding of your own existence. But it's also true that, that there are aspects of your body that cannot be accomplished by being in front of a screen. Taking a walk, breathing fresh air. This is, you know, being in nature, and I like to reclaim the notion of nature, non-human nature, where there are, instead of being just houses and people, maybe you are surrounded by trees and birds and other non-human animals. Something that a lot of people now really cherish after COVID, after having had to be inside with just humans. A lot of people can't wait to be outside and just be without humans, because humans are beautiful, but just having humans all day long is too much, like everything. We have an addiction of humans. Now we need some non-human spaces. So I think that, of course, we go back to the Tao, to the balance of existence. Technology is unfolding. If we're just spending all day long in front of a screen, that's where the Tao is at a complete disbalance. There is no balance anymore, and we get sick, our physical body gets sick, and we are probably putting out their energy in the network that are not positive either, because we get like in this frenzy state. So I think that, you know, for the people who are getting completely out of technology, I think it's very brave and beautiful, and they're always, you know, people are nomads. You can get out of technology and then you can come back to technology. I did that myself. I spent, for instance, you know, sometimes I do go into 10 days of silent meditation. And when I do that, I don't use any technology, no books, nothing. And that's beautiful. You don't miss anything. You actually don't miss anything, you know? So that's something that I would definitely, you know, encourage, but doesn't have to be extreme. Doesn't have to be, okay, now it's just all without technology. Experiment with yourself. See, how do you feel having maybe weekends without technology, or maybe, you know, some days without technology, or some hours if you cannot do a day without technology. Experiment with that. Be brave on that sense, and be honest to yourself, loyal to yourself. See what makes you feel at peace and what doesn't, you know. And if the digital experience or the physical experience is getting out of balance, you know, monitor yourself, have your checkup point, and pause.
Thank you, Francesca. We have one more question from Mark Esposito. Mark is asking, I feel like modern digital technology ruptures the cosmological, non-anthropocentric perspective of indigenous cultures. Would you agree? I have been searching for an ecological perspective narrative that integrates these parts, but haven't found one yet. Would you have any suggestions, perhaps found in science fiction?
Magda, can I ask you please to repeat the first part of the question?
Okay. I feel like modern digital technology ruptures the cosmological, non-anthropocentric perspective of indigenous cultures. Would you agree? I have been searching for an ecological perspective narrative that integrates these parts, but haven't found one yet. Would you have any suggestions, perhaps in science fiction?
Thank you so much. All right, so I would say that let's go to this, for instance, cosmological approach, a perspectivist approach, for instance, of Amerindian cosmologies. So according to this approach, so we're talking about cosmologies that developed in eras where technologies were there, but for instance, were not the digital technology that we think nowadays. Because when you think of the notion of technology, obviously, you're not just talking about digital technology. The first technology that is considered technology, for instance, is fire, and the technology of cooking. Now, fire being considered one of the first technology, we go back 30,000 years before the Common Era. If you think of the use of tools as technology, we go back 200,000 years ago. So the point is that, of course, we need to really think of technology in an expanded ways. And to this, we can also definitely, again, be loyal to the 21st century and think, for instance, of digital technologies. Now, if we go through, for instance, an Amerindian cosmologist approach, we would see what is considered in that tradition the spirit as something fluid. Think, for instance, let's go back to the metaphor of the ocean. Let's think, for instance, of the ocean. Let's think of water. So you think the water is all encompassing, this big ocean in which everything is spirit. But then there are bodies. For instance, a fish is a body, algae are bodies, seaweeds are bodies, shells are bodies. All these elements, for instance, that live in the water. And also, for instance, to this we can add another layer of, for instance, objects. Let's say, for instance, like we have, I have a glass here with water. So the water now takes the form of the glass. But if I bring, for instance, this other object, the water is taking the shape of this object. Now, when we think of cosmological Amerindian tradition, the shaman is considered an interspecies being, which means that is someone who is not so much fixed on the shape, but is focusing on the interconnection that in this case, for instance, would be what we thought as the example of the water. So the shaman knows that if you think, for instance, of everything interconnected, everything is, for instance, part of the ocean, and then you have different bodies, but all of these are part of this big picture, you can move liquidly through all these bodies because you are not caught just into your specific body, because you're not just that shape, you are interconnected with everything else. So the shaman is the one who does not forget these two layers that are not in any hierarchical ways. So the shaman is in a specific body, but can take any other shape. This is why the shaman can become an animal, can become a plant. Think, for instance, of the ayahuasca tradition in Peru, where you actually, by ingesting the plant, you literally become the plant in this approach. And so you're not just drinking the plant, you are becoming the plant is talking to you and through you. And before ingesting the plant, you need to ask permission. Otherwise, it would be almost like a cannibalistic approach. You would be almost eating yourself. So you need to ask permission to the plant. Once the plant gives you the sign that you can drink the plant, then you become the plant and you see as the plant, you bring the message of the plant. You literally, physically become the plant. Now, in this tradition, because it was developed, it's a very ancient tradition, which is actually common to all native experience of all planet Earth, and it's not just of the Amerindian. If you think of shamanistic tradition in Eurasia and Africa and Australasia, they all come with this kind of approach. Why is that? Because we can bring so many different reasons, but if you think of, for instance, Paleolithic time, we're talking about 99% of human history. Humans had to be fully balanced with existence. It was not an anthropocentric time. You had to be in balance with plants, or if you ate all the plants, you come back as a nomad 6 months later, there would be no plants. You would have to be in communication with everything, non-human animals, plants, the weather in order to survive. So you had to be tuned in. Now I am in a room. If it's snowing, if it's raining outside, I don't care. It's nice, but I don't have a specific. I can be warm in my room. If I'm hungry, I can go to the supermarket and buy something. So I'm not so much depending on all these external factors, which are obviously not external. Going back to your question, technology in this sense can also be seen as also part of the ocean in which the spirit is also manifesting. So of course, because of this tradition are so ancient, if we think about many thousands of years ago, there were not laptops, but there were other types of technologies. The cooking of the ayahuasca is a type of technology. So I'm trying to say here that if we go to that kind of approach, the laptop itself is also a body, is a technical body that is also part of the spirit. So a shaman probably, a kind of a techno-shaman, then we go into techno-shamanism, could also probably be part of the internet. And this is when I froze when in 2012 I got that Skype notification, because I literally thought it's all interconnected. Patrick was so much, for instance, in the idea of digital life that I literally thought, like, is his energy now in the internet, for instance? I did have that thought. And I'm sorry for some of you sounds too metaphysical or too posthumanistic, but I have to be sincere on this. That's why I could not check that message until I was, you know, like I had to do a little meditation, take a walk outside. Now all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. and I was like, okay, before I go to sleep, I need to figure this out. And then it was just an automatic, just between the comma, just automatic Skype notification. That gave me so much existential perspectives though. So, you know, going back to your question, I think that we can brave on this and really see, for instance, technology as the unfolding of the spirit, and, you know, think of the possibility of, you know, we're already part of that. Our digital traces are creating the internet, are changing algorithms. What we write is changing people's life. The way you mold that email is going to make someone laugh or cry. So we are already part of the internet. And of course, the internet itself, some people consider it alive, AI, some people say artificial intelligence, other people call it A-life, artificial life.
We have one last question. Asfa Abdul is asking, Francesca, I really like your concept of posthumanism, but what I would like to know is about the connection of a human with surroundings, technology and biology. And then the man since the centuries before has relation with this, with all of these things. So were the men in the 15th century posthuman as well?
It's such a good question. Thank you so much, F. So yes, that's a very interesting question. To the point that some people, including myself, have been claiming that on some level, we've always been posthuman. So that the posthuman, it is true that, you know, being in the 21st century, locating ourselves honestly in this spatio-temporal location, we have to be brave enough to be redefining the human, because the human is not the same human that we had 200,000 years ago. It's a human that is in a different type of planet. At the time, for instance, there were ice ages. We are now actually the opposite. There is actually climate changes bringing more heat to the surface. Humans, you know, had a different type of habits, different symbolic paradigms. There was a matrilineal time, and now we're in patriarchal time. So it was a different time. So on this, of course, we need to be honest enough to locate ourselves and say, okay, what is the human now? What does it mean to be human? And some people say, okay, we are post-human, transhuman, cyborgs. And that's okay. That's, you know, that's an answer that we can give by saying that humans have changed, obviously, and that, you know, this era is really bringing the connection with technology even more to the surface, to the point that some humans cannot survive without technology. And I'm not just talking about the psychological impact. Think of people with cyborg, pacemakers. I have a lot of friends that have pacemakers. They need that in order to survive. So here we have an example of a physical body that need technology in order to be alive, not to enhance themselves. And then we have, for instance, humans like Kevin Warwick, like the Iborg, another example, who are implementing technology inside of them to enhance their experience. For instance, in the case of Kevin Warwick, we're going back to year 2000, he inserted a microchip inside of his body, and through that, he would be connected directly to the internet. In the case of Iborg, I know both of them personally, they're very interesting people, you can look more at their work. But in the case of Iborg, which is Neil Harbison, he had an antenna implanted in his brain because he was born as colorblind. So he can see, but he cannot see colors. Now through this antenna, he can hear colors, not just colors that humans can see, but now even colors that are out in space or infrared. So the point here is that some people are saying, well, this is, you know, like it's not longer the human that we know. Humans implanting technology inside, it's kind of new. Let's give it a name. Let's call it cyborg. Let's call it, you know, whatever. These people, for instance, use the term cyborg because it would be the meeting of cyb as cybernetic, org as organism. So this is an approach. And this is, for instance, very much connected to transhumanism. Transhumanism, I didn't mention so much in my talk. I have other talks and also clarify this in my book. But transhumanism is very keen on enhancing the human through specifically science and technology. So they're saying we were humans, now some of us are transhumans, which means people that are really embracing technology or through their bodies or in the way they think. And also we are going to become posthuman, some of us, which according to them is very close, is not here yet, so we are not posthuman yet. But according to them, in some cases, for instance, if you think of the case of mind uploading, that's a good example for transhumanism. Mind uploading, you have human consciousness that have been uploaded in a robotic machine. So we have a merging of human experience and also a robotic body. This is something unique. It's not human any longer, because humans historically have been organically. Some of you were mentioning the organism at the core of the experience, but also it has been uploaded human consciousness, which of course doesn't mean that this person now is alive through this machine, but that this machine has been highly formed by the experience of a specific human that lived in a specific century, which in this case would be 21st or 22nd century. I think this kind of technology is coming very soon. So this is a case, for instance, of a post-human being, because this kind of being is in this case, genealogically related to the human, but no longer human. Or another case would be humans moving to Mars. Generation after generation, they evolve into different species that come back to Earth and they cannot, for instance, procreate with humans on Earth. So these humans on Mars, and according to NASA, pre-COVID, NASA were saying that we were going to actually move to Mars 2029. Now, maybe with COVID, things have changed. But the idea of humans moving to Mars is really happening. I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of agencies working on this. For instance, SpaceX and many others. So the point is, if there are humans moving to Mars, and because it's expensive, because the technology is not easy to manage, they cannot really come back for some generations. And if they stay in isolation for long enough, that may evolve into a different species. And we have this to the whole history of the Homo sapiens, with Neanderthals, with the Denisovans, with all kinds of species that eventually also got extinct. And they also, co-emerge in the human DNA through actually the merging of different species, so that we have interbred of these species as well, many cases of this. But going back to your point, and just to finalize, so that's a whole approach according to which we are not post-human yet. Another take on this is that to be post-human is not in any way related to technology, but is related to an existential approach, the technologies of the self, the technologies of existence. According to this approach, and on this I have a whole article if you want, it's called We Have Always Been Post-Human. According to this, we've always been post-human, because to be post-human means simply a specific take on existence. For instance, the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, for instance, in India, it's very post-humanistic. It's the idea of really a non-dualistic approach to existence. Jainism has a lot of post-humanistic ideas and practices, to the point that Jain people have a very strict diet. They don't eat anything that is alive, to the point of not eating, for instance, potatoes or garlic, because they can be planted and still have life. So they really try not to harm anyone, because they have a very non-dualistic approach to existence. If you look at the Paleolithic time, we have many instances of the human really being emerged with everything else. So going back to your question, and sorry if I took too much time. Yes, two answers. If you're going from a transhumanist approach, for instance, the idea of history is more linear. So no, we are not post-human yet. Post-human beings are coming very soon, but it's a linear approach. If we're going from a post-humanist approach, yes, we could have always been post-human, but being post-human is based on an existential awareness. And that kind of existential awareness doesn't have to be human. Maybe an AI could have this kind of awareness, and it could be a post-human being. Could be an animal, but we don't have the kind of language unless you talk about mystics. Could be a plant. We don't have the kind of language unless you have a mystic. And it could have been always there. And so that is a non-linear approach, and definitely, it's a type of awareness that, yes, we could have always been post-human.
All right. Thank you so much, Francesca. And our thanks again to Mahindra Humanities Center and to MetaLab and to Matthew Battles for helping us with the technology and for being there for us. I'm going to just give Hannah last words so she can wrap it up the session.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, Francesca. And thank you so much, Magda, for curating and moderating the discussion. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope that you would have a wonderful evening and join us in our next session. So see you hopefully very soon.
And I would like also to thank so